Hey everybody, hope everyone is doing well today. Wanted to make this video to talk about how my family views race because I just want to let you know that, look, it's not just us that have these views. A lot of people out there, including our relatives, have these views. We talk about it at our kitchen dining tables. We do all those things. Now, it's just the only difference between people like me and many of you who are watching is the fact we actually make it out and open. We directly put ourselves out there. Now, my family doesn't do it that much, but they have a lot of views that are very similar about every single race, including whites. So let me tell you something, folks. You don't have to be a follower of Pat Buchanan, David Duke, attend an Murren conference. You don't have to necessarily believe in their views to buy what they are pointing out. And a lot of these people, they don't really tune into these channels. They just sit down and think about it and they realize what it is. They see what's going on. And I think because the narrative by the establishment, the media, academia, has been so anti-white that they have been also been waking up by themselves. That's the thing. They just don't be as vocal as they are. Okay, and they share these views with me very, very similar. And not just about, like blacks and Hispanics, but even Jews. Yeah. Let me tell you something. My ethnicity, people of my nationality are among the most critical people when it comes to Jews. Which is to say, by the way, I'm really, first of all, I have to say, I'm sick of how the SPLC and the ADL wants to portray that it's people of European descent are the only ones that are so-called anti-Semitic, which I don't even think that's the proper term. But lots of people can be critical of Jews. But as I go on, I want to start with my father. And I haven't seen him in more than 15 years. No, he's still alive. He lives in LA, San Fernando Valley, where I was born and raised until I was 4. And let's just start about who he really doesn't like. Now, working in LA County for more than 3 decades, since 1980, he's been going out there because he has to do trips on his own. And he's certainly not a fan of blacks. And I don't blame him. Now, keep in mind that this guy, he grew up, my father, in the Khuzestan province in southwestern Iran, the northern tip of the Caspian Sea, which, by the way, has amazing weather, and the temperatures are in the 70s. So is Dubai. It's a good time to go. It's not like 53 degrees out here because the deserts here, it gets chilly. And you can see that there's a good sizable black population in Iran, especially southern Iran. And a lot of the blacks were transported, unlike here from Western Africa, they came from Eastern Africa. And I think from that, he's been able to get a certain view of race. Because there's articles that show that Persians and black and Arabs as well, they don't have a good view of blacks. From that experience, now I will have to say, the blacks in the Middle East, they're not as like gangster rap thug types as they are here. And I think you can know why that is. I think you know who's pushing that. I don't want to get into it. And by the way, when I'm going to get to those people, these are not my views. So if YouTube wants to take this video down, go ahead. They're just doing the wrong job. Anyway, the point is that he doesn't like blacks. He had horrible views of neighborhoods like South LA, Watts, Inglewood, Compton. He would tell me that, hey, Cyrus, are there any blacks in your school? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, yeah, they seem to have their own neighborhoods like Fontana and Rialto. Because we lived in the Inland Empire at that time. That's like 40, 50 miles east of LA. He just didn't like them. He said that they can get violent. They're loud. They're scary. We just cannot get along with them. I mean, who can really get along with them? That's really my question when you think about it. this is the thing I just wanted to point out. It's like every group of people they have in contact with, there's a lot of chaos that happens. And it's like I can get along with them very well, but just the way they are, it kind of gets you. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like when I was a little toddler, and there was a supermarket in the San Fernando Valley called Hughes or Lucky's at that time, and I screamed when I was a little taller because I was scared of this black guy. Toddlers can tell race, believe it or not. Even I heard pets can tell race on how they are. But anyway, my father didn't like them. And he says, yeah, they dominate the music industry. They do very well in sports. And then, of course, he didn't have a very good view of Latinos because obviously LA County has a very high number of Latinos. And we know that a lot of Latinos there don't assimilate. A high portion of LA County Latinos are not in the country legally. He was just very sick of it. He had to go to those areas. And not to mention, there's a language, and of course, many data shows that they commit higher rates of crime. But it's just, he said the quiet part out loud when we were in the Bay Area about the fact that one of the reasons why the Bay Area isn't so overcrowded compared to Los Angeles, because the Latinos will have like 10, 20 children, and they will overflood Southern California. Now, of course, that I don't know if that is the main reason, but there's certainly some truth to that. And maybe you might argue that the Bay Area, they make their areas expensive is because they don't want those people to move in. And actually, believe it or not, LA County and Orange County, their Latino percentages, not just black, has actually either stayed flat or actually fallen, believe it or not. And you know where they're going to. Don't get me started on that. Yeah. So he just wasn't a really fan of. Now, my father had a good view or decent view on Asians. We would kind of hang out with them, when they had like birthdays and stuff. He worked with a lot of Asians. He didn't seem to have too much issues with them. But with the group of people, surprisingly, he had a lot of issues with was Arabs. And it doesn't matter if they are born abroad, because my father was born abroad, and obviously I believe nearly all the Arabs that worked for LA County Public Works, they were Arab. And they just didn't get along, I'm telling you. Now, don't think just because we're in the same region mean we get along. Now, as you know, Arabs are more Semitic. We are more like Nordic, Turkish in our roots. So, we're more like Indo-European. I know we have some Semitic DNA. You can tell by looking at me. And my father had a little bit more Semitic DNA because if you go further south in Iran, the darker the people are. Remember, Iran and a lot of these countries, they're not monoculture like Japan and Iceland. These are mixed societies, and it doesn't seem that they were getting along with the Arabs and many of these other ethnic groups. There's been plenty of conflict with these people. And it's been going on for centuries. Remember, we just had a war with Arabs, which, of course, Saudi Arabia backed in the 1980s when Saddam attacked us in the revolution. And a lot of that pain goes on. So he didn't like them. Now, as far as white people, he got along with them very well, except for he wasn't really a fan of like the country, bluegrass, redneck types. He just wasn't really a fan of it. And I can see why he lived in Southern California because there isn't that many of them. There's more here in Vegas. He has noticed that. And by the way, my father, he would stay away from these black and Hispanic neighborhoods as much as possible. And the problem was with people like us and whites and many others, it felt like LA County there was only a certain tiny segments of LA County that you can go to. It's like the county just shrinks. This is the problem when you have all this multiracialism. It's just that these areas, they shrink for you. There's a lot of no-go areas that you can go to. I mean, there's so many areas of Southern California that I've never really been to because of all of this multiracialism. Remember, if let's just say all the Nordic, Anglo-Saxon Europeans are gone, that doesn't mean that we're all just going to get along. We're going to have many of the problems. In fact, our taxes and Asians, they're going to have to go up because who's going to take care of these people? Think about it. And by the way, I almost forgot. I was in the Aladdin Hotel and Casino when we used to visit there. And I told my father, I was like, hey, Dad, did you know that the city of Las Vegas has about 12% blacks? He just gave me such a grim look on his face. Now, speaking of blacks, I might have some black DNA because of the Arabian slave trade. I'm not sure. However, and by the way, where's reparations on them? Think about it. California passed reparations. Can you think about it? This is just absurd. Any Persian elected official who supports that, you ought to be out of your mind. Seriously, I want you all to hold your own ethnic groups, racial groups accountable. And I hope we don't see any Persian women dating black guys, especially the thuggish types. I'm getting sick of this, man. I really am. But, that's just the way it was, unfortunately. He would live in these separate neighborhoods. Oh, and last but not least, I remember it was my father that would say that who are all these Jews that they constantly have on the news media? Who are the Jews that they constantly are involved in the financial markets? Because he would always watch CNBC and Bloomberg. Yeah. And of course, he got devastated by listening to these analysts in the toxic media in the late 90s and early 2000s by the dot-com bubble. Think about it. Of course, he learned his lesson. We were able to predict the housing bubble later on. But he said, yeah, who are all these, what? And so it just tells you that these views that I have, they're not just something I just tune into, whether it's Sam Dixon, whether it is Jared Taylor, or all these types of people, or even Tucker Carlson to a much lesser extent. These views are something that my family has talked about. And I'm sick and tired of people saying that people who are European descent or white countries are among the most racist. You guys are actually among the least racist people I've known. Do you think that people in Iran are less racist than people in America, particularly white folks? And I'm going to get into that, by the way. Do you think that the Chinese are less racist? Do you think Indians are less racist? It's a multiracial society. Think about it. Mexico, Congo, you tell me, give me one country. By the way, China had some African immigration and they couldn't get along. They had the same issues with crime and everything, so they had to send them back. Think about it. Now I'm going to get to my mom, by the way, because my mom says a lot of Jewish people are scammers. Now, I'm I know I'm not supposed to tell this family secret, by the way. And it's another family secret that my mom's relatives, they had black labor, in case if you were wondering. It's a family secret, but look, I have to bring this up to tell you what it is. And her and our family table, we talk about how they disproportionately have control in Wall Street. Of course, there's a lot of evidence to prove otherwise, don't get me wrong. But they have a lot of control in the pharma industry. They have a lot of control in the media. They do all these scam con jobs. She tells me that blacks and Hispanics, particularly Amerindians, they think differently. That's why you shouldn't date them. They cause a lot of troubles. My mom is very picky about who I date. My mom used to tell me like 20 years ago, 10 years ago, don't date Asian women. Because there's a lot of troubles, there's a lot of probability, there's a lot of BS that's going to happen. So she prefers if I stay with probably white or Persian. Yeah. Now, of course, I know a lot of you don't want me to date white women, particularly the Nordic Anglo-Saxon ones, because you see that as mixed racing. But what choice do I have? That's the problem. I'm one of the very few Persians in Las Vegas. This is the thing. When you live in a multiracial society. My mom told me that, like, you know, don't go to certain areas of Chicago where I just was a couple of months ago. There's just all these blacks in these neighborhoods, in these mass transit systems. We don't feel safe. Think about it. I haven't met one Persian that's ever lived in a majority black neighborhood. My cousin lives in a majority Hispanic neighborhood, which they tend to assimilate better in La Habra. I've seen some Persians live in a majority Asian neighborhood. but nearly all of them live in majority white neighborhoods. Think about it. Because we're more likely to get along with you. Now, yeah, do I have issues with white people? Absolutely. But I'll rather live in that society than all the other three types. Think about it. Now, if I had to choose specifically, I might choose to live in a Mediterranean section than I would in a Nordic section. That's just to keep in mind. Maybe an area with Greeks and Spaniards and Southern Italians or whatever. Here's the thing. I moved to Glendale, an Armenian girl. I don't know. That's certainly a possibility. Oh, I haven't been to Glendale in ages. But yeah, in Glendale, there's a lot of conflict with Armenians and Latinos. There's just so much, even with blacks. It's absolutely interesting. But my mom just says, like, just being friends with certain types. Doesn't Iran have to support the black Americans? Yeah, well, black Americans. I mean, they're probably like 1% of the country, and they're mostly in southern Iran. But we can see they outperform in sports, and they don't do so well in money, math, all these other different things. So, but it's you white people are the reason why they're struggling. And the same in Iraq and Saudi Arabia, and why there's conflict with them in Libya and all these other parts of the world, Pakistan, you name it. And by the way, my mom is dating this Pakistani guy, and he uses harsh languages against Jews about how, yeah, they were kept in ghettos and that they shouldn't have changed that. This is something that William Pierce talked about. And they have different views on World War II and what happened. And he says, yeah, this country is supposed to be an Anglo-Saxon, Nordic, Protestant country. He's tired of seeing white women and black guys in commercials. He's sick of it. Hispanics, they have their issues. The state of California is lost because of that. But they're better, hardworking people. He employs them. And they're more likely to have kids out of wedlock. Blacks commit more crime. It's just the same thing over and over and over again. Of course, his son just married an Asian person, and his other two children married whites. And that's kind of multiracial when you think about it. Although not all Pakistanis are darker skinned. Some of them are pretty light skinned, depending on where you are. Because, the real white race goes all the way to northern India. That's just to keep in mind. But there you have it. We believe this stuff. And don't get started with my cousin. They know what's going on. They know what's happening with Israel, although I don't know exactly what's going on 100% with Israel, Saudi Arabia. It's hard to say. I really think both sides are at trouble. However, I've seen a lot of horrible things about Israel. It's just, to me, it's, boy, and just what they did. You look at the pharmaceutical industry, the Pfizer CEO, somebody's got some explaining to do. And all this is going to kick in. This is we have to see how this is going to affect the demographics. We really do. But I was at the country cowboy, uh, it's just convention. And again, I'm not. We're not saying that all of them are messed up. We're just talking about a handful of them. But like I said, I've seen a lot of evidence that that's just overinflated. It's not as true. You got to keep in mind. You got the Jesuits, Vatican. I don't know, folks. I know there's just an elite that controls everything. George Carlin says, the owners of this country. That's one thing I'm pretty much sure. We're going to have to see. But when I was at that Cowboy Christmas, a lot of them were anti vaccine. That gives me a lot of hope for our long term society. They have to have a lot of kids, they have to keep producing our meat and keep our economy going. Boy, this is just scary. Everybody's starting to really realize what's going on. You don't have to really see have to listen to these channels and everything of what's going on. And I'm going to show you all these clips about more truths about my family and what they see. what happened in the past times. It really is, folks. All right, so yeah, here you go. Here's this empty parking lot, everything. There's barely any by. Yeah, but there's just enough to make us miserable. I don't know what to tell you, folks. I mean, just here, I'm gonna just end it right there. I think I lost my thoughts. I mean, I know there's this Jewish guy who runs a UNLV immigration clinic. He's totally anti-white. He got $1 million of state and local funds by that anchor baby assemblywoman, giving it to illegal alien defense funds. Don't have birthright citizenship. Harry Reid was against it. But we have a lot of those you-know-what. They keep... It's just sad, man. It really is. And I'm just, tired. I mean, they're getting tired of seeing Wakanda and all this other culture everywhere you go. Think about it. Look at this. Look, this pizza place just closed down. Yeah, and I just told you in this intersection, there was this older white woman and older black guy that just got arrested. I mean, when are people going to learn about this? This is just sad. It really is. And by the way, I was just going to say that I've noticed, like, oh God, who is this guy crossing the street? I think it's a you-know-who. No, it's not one of those types. But I know those types are more likely to cross the street. Yeah, think about it. It's just absolutely unbelievable, folks. When are people going to learn? When we were in St. Louis, by the way, they noticed how the whites wanted to really segregate themselves from the blacks, because St. Louis the way it is. By the way, gas is falling, but they're still pretty high compared to much of the country. Yeah, and then we went to some all-black restaurants, and they just didn't want to go in. I was okay. Think about it. But obviously, when there's a lot of my female relatives, they just don't feel comfortable. That's the thing. It doesn't matter if you're a male or female. But sometimes I just think it's like women they're just like free to have preferences. I don't know. But women are very easily manipulative. That's just the sad truth. And maybe that's why they're doing this, because they just have no other way. All right, everybody. I'll see you guys. Have fun.